everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's AVST Live webinar. Today our topic is the unified messaging options for the Microsoft Exchange Online customers. And before we get started, I want to let you know a couple of things before I turn it over to our Director of Sales Engineering, Neil Butler. First of all, we're going to do a Plantronics headset giveaway, and we won't do that during the webinar, but as a thank you for attending, you've earned your chance to win one of these, and if you're the lucky winner, we will send you an email later today with that information and get your address so we can deliver that to you. Another thing, the slides are available for download, so if you can get to the handouts area on your webinar panel, you'll see where you can download those, and in addition, we will send those out to you as a thanks for attending as well. So look for the follow-up email later today, which will include a link to download the slides as well as a link to this recording so that you can share with any coworkers where that's relevant. And lastly, we will have time for Q&A before the webinar concludes, so we'll save that for the end. You're welcome to type your questions in at any time, and of course, we'll let you know when it is time for the questions so you can submit at that point as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Neil Butler.
Thank you very much, Ann. Welcome, everyone. So this webinar is a little different for us in that it is actually probably the most tightly focused one we've ever done. This is responding to a specific announcement from Microsoft that affects a small set of Microsoft customers. And those of you that have been following this at all know, about a month ago, Microsoft surprised, I think, a lot of people by coming out and saying they were discontinuing support for those customers who maintained their own PBX in their enterprise, but had started to use Exchange Online through Office 365 for their voicemail unified messaging system. And those customers alone, not customers who have Microsoft deployed on site, but only those up in the cloud, were told that one of the components needed for that to work that Microsoft provides in their cloud, the session border controller, will support for that will be discontinued in a little less than a year. And what that means is those customers have to find another way to use Exchange. And it was kind of out of the blue, and a lot of those customers, I think, were surprised and followed by being unhappy. But Microsoft did offer some advice on what you could do in their announcement. So what we're going to do is look at their announcement, look at their options, and talk about where we fit in this, and kind of let you know why we would be doing a webinar on this. And of course, those of you that have been on the webinars before, or maybe looked us up a little, we've been doing unified communications and specifically unified messaging for longer than anyone else in both the Microsoft world and any other groupware world as well. So we have a lot of experience in this, both with on-site and hosted solutions, and certainly in large enterprises, because that has been kind of our target market for the last 15 years. If you look at kind of who we do business with, they're the very top of the enterprises here in the United States and throughout the world. And the reason we're successful in this market is we're not owned by a large PBX manufacturer or a network company or anything else. We're our own standalone company. But we've been focusing on this market, unified messaging and unified communications, call control, for a long time. Over 35 years, since the earliest part of the company was founded. And along the way, we've taken what was just a voicemail and added things to it, and including over 20 years ago, unified messaging. And we're actually recognized by Gartner as the best of breed product to get for unified messaging. We do more than that. We do a lot of call control, personal assistant, speech recognition solutions. But really the messaging and unified messaging is the piece we've been in the longest. So if we look at what Microsoft is talking about, there's sort of two types of customers out here. One type is using an on-site PBX. Let's say this is an NEC or an Avaya or a Mitel or a Cisco, some type of PBX. And then whereas normal, those calls to those phones, when they went unanswered, would forward to a voicemail system on-prem, instead, because they're using Exchange Online, they have a piece of hardware, a media gateway, could be a dialogic media gateway, audio codes, and any number of those, that take, let's say, some sort of connection and turn that into a SIP trunk run that through some sort of border controller and firewall on their side, out through the web, and into a session border controller that's on the Microsoft site, and then into the Exchange server. So now what happens when the phone rings 3 times, let's say user A, it is now forwarding through that chain all the way in and being answered by the server in the cloud. The problem with this from Microsoft's point of view is they no longer want to support that online SBC. It's also possible some of these customers might not have a border or might not have a gateway. They might actually be using a SIP trunk directly. There's about a half a dozen PBXs that engineered SIP trunk connectivity to the Exchange Online, but it is still going through the session border controller, and that's what goes away. So obviously at the point where that goes away, calls can no longer forward to voicemail, and so what Microsoft has said is you need to find another solution. And there's maybe not that big a surprise. Microsoft's been not only moving towards cloud solutions, but pushing their customer base quite a bit towards cloud solutions, and this is just one more step in that. Now, the good thing is, from our point of view, is when those customers run into that problem, our solution doesn't use that architecture. Our solution uses something completely different, using the native APIs, and we can continue to answer calls on-prem, but put the messages into Exchange Online. So the end users would affect very little change at all, and basically, life would go on with them. So that's what we're going to talk about from our point of view. Now, what Microsoft says is these customers have 4 options. Option 1, just go ahead, throw everything on site away, get rid of your PBX, and move to the Cloud PBX up in the cloud, and of course that'll integrate with the Exchange Online without any problem. And this option probably won't be very popular. The Cloud PBX is very new, and it's really missing a lot of very critical features. So people have been looking at it and evaluating it and sort of giving Microsoft that list of things they need to add to the product before it'll really do as an enterprise switching fabric. So not too much interest in there, I'm thinking. The second is you can get rid of your PBX on site and go to Skype for Business Enterprise Voice on site. And that will work fine because that connection will still be supported. So calls, would forward on the Skype phones straight in, and then that wouldn't be any problem. The problem, of course, with 1 and 2, the big problem is if you have those assets, that PBX, with a lot of money left on the books for them, throwing them away and buying something new is maybe not going to be that popular. So that's really what they want you to do, but they have at least talked about 2 other options. Option 3, saying there's types of connectors you can get, and at the same time, you can put just a part of Skype for Business on site. So you do a hybrid deployment where your main Skype would be in the cloud and Skype for Business would be at the enterprise, and the PBX using a special gateway would connect to that Skype component, and then things would continue to work. And that may be of interest to people as they start looking at it, but option 4, I think, is going to be of more interest. We get a chance to talk to the customers, because what they're saying is basically find another way to do it, find another voice messaging system. Now, we like that story, of course. We'd love people to buy our system, but if you have 5,000 users and they're using Exchange and they're used to it and trained on it, that aside from the whole cost of having to do that interruption to business of learning a new system and everything is not something that will sit all that well. So what we're going to do is give them a solution that's less painful financially, less disruptive, and architecturally, I think, one that they're going to like for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about. So certainly, unified messaging is something we are very qualified to talk about. Been doing it longer than anyone else, recognized as a leader, and we have the most flexible unified messaging system out there in terms of what we can do and how we can connect. And if you look at the functionality of what unified messaging does, which is basically, gives your messages all in one place, all in one client, we have that. But at the same time, our system offers options besides that. So we can connect to multiple email systems, multiple email servers simultaneous, multiple domains. So a lot of things that a large enterprise might have, they're going to find that we're one of the few that could actually move into that environment comfortably. Also, a lot of customers don't really like for all of their users to store messages in Exchange. Now, these customers we're talking about that have Exchange online, obviously they've gotten by that in the sense that's the only place they can store messages, but we think some of them might appreciate the ability to maybe move some of those customers with really critical messages that maybe would be an issue with HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley issues, things like that, to be able to kind of split those users up. So we give them choices besides what they already have, but we don't take anything away. We're still going to let them do the exact type of unified messaging they were doing. From a user's point of view, there'll be almost no difference. So if you look at kind of the architecture that they talk about and the architecture that we're going to use is now the phones ring on-premise. They forward, as do automated attendant calls, to the CXE system. The system answers. It literally runs the entire application right there locally within the enterprise. If that call results in a message, that message is recorded on the CXE server, and then the message only, not the phone call, but just the message, is moved up to the user's mailbox in Exchange Online. And that's done using Microsoft APIs, EWS and the Graph API. We're just starting to move some things over to. So now that a message is in there from a user's point of view, they have exactly what they had before. They have all their messages in their inbox, voicemail, email, and possibly fax, depending on what they're doing. So that's architecture number 4, and that's exactly what we do. Now, there's another architecture, architecture number 3, that says what you do is you take that telephony connection that you had going out to the gateway before and now run it into a specific new kind of gateway, and they talk about the TE AnyNode as an example, and then that has to connect to an on-premise Skype for Business server. So this is option 3, where you have to deploy part of Skype to use that. And then the Skype actually forwards the call to the other Skype server that's in the cloud. And you notice there's no SBC in that picture, so that's what they're doing. They're getting rid of the SBC, but still allowing that type of connection. And in this type of connection, just like the original one they have now, the entire telephone call is using up bandwidth. So when somebody calls and it forwards and they're listening to your greeting and they're recording you a message and doing all of that, or when a user calls in and plays their messages, they're using up a certain amount of bandwidth up to Exchange Online. And that's been an issue. The fact that people tend to have delays and bandwidth problems in that environment means this particular solution won't help that. Basically, you're duplicating the bandwidth and everything else that you need. And you have to install Skype on site. So the question is, who really wants to do that? In our case, no Skype on site required. And remember, we're not using that bandwidth. We simply move the message up. So whereas that telephone call, you know, is using, I don't know how much bandwidth, 64K a second or something like that for the entire call, we're actually going to move just the message up. And also, even better than that, when the user calls into the system, logs into the CXE to play their messages, even though they're stored in Exchange Online, we keep a cache of those messages on our server. Let's say the last week of new messages that came in. It's in a FIFO cache there. So for most users, when they call in and go to play that message, we'll actually know it's there and play it out of our cache, even further reducing any kind of drain on that data link up to Exchange. Almost any customer you talk to would like the fact that if they have to go to a new version, can't they please go to a new version where their bandwidth and delay issues get better instead of worse. This is why we're pretty comfortable. Our solution's going to prove pretty popular for those people. So it's scalable, and we can meet anything that any customer has out there. It integrates with any PBX out there, premise and cloud, and we're going to allow them to continue using the Exchange Outlook form from Exchange Now, what does that mean? When the customers installed Exchange there is a special form. So when you open up an email, you see an email, but when you open up a voicemail, the form looks different. It has a player bar and a way to change, whether you're playing through the speakers or the phone, all of those things. Now we have our own Outlook form that we really like, but we we understand the not having to retrain users, is a strong motivation. So we've arranged so that those people that are already using those Exchange Outlook forms can continue to use those forms. So from accessing voicemail from your Exchange, it'll be exactly like it was before. There'll be no difference. Now, we're going to handle the rest of it. We're going to handle the call-in user interface, the telephone user interface where you dial DTMF keys or using speech commands. We're going to handle that through our system, so that will be a little bit different. And the personal greeting and mailbox setup and a few of those things will be a little bit different. But the general function of getting your messages through the email client will remain unchanged. And as I said, as this goes in to replace Exchange UM, there's a lot of things we do that go far beyond what Exchange UM could offer in the automated attendant, IVR, personal assistant, that sort of functionality. So we think most customers will want to take a look at that. And because of the way our system works, you can say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start with 100 users first. You can put our system in and move 100 users and leave the rest on Exchange Online and move them in a staggered way until you're really comfortable with how it works. So regardless of what your PBX is out there now, and regardless of what you might be changing to, so you might have a legacy PBX now, and you're using Exchange Online. Now you have to change something. If you change to us, and down the road you say, okay, now it's time to upgrade my legacy phone system, you can go to Skype for Business. You can go to the newer IP version of the manufacturer you have. You can go to a new manufacturer. It won't matter. Our piece will stay in place, and from the user's perspective, there won't be any change. And that's always a good thing in an enterprise. We spend a lot of time in the Microsoft world. Obviously, having the knowledge to do this is critical. So we've taken the time to go out and get the partner certifications. We're a gold partner. There's lots of gold partners in the world, but we're a little unusual in that we got the certification not only for messaging, which would be our kind of our core competency, but also communications, which is basically the Skype technology. So we're one of the few in the country that understand this soup to nuts, from the Skype piece of it all the way through the messaging piece of it. And that gives us a kind of a unique position in terms of how we can support the Microsoft partners. Now, like it or not, the customer has to make a change. I mean, this is not something that you can negotiate with Microsoft. They put the data out there and, kind of left those customers on their own. So they need to get started. I think there's about 11 months left, something like that now. Well, it seems like a long time to research and deploy a major change in your telephony infrastructure and your messaging infrastructure for a large enterprise. That's, it's already starting to get kind of in a short time frame. The concept here is a simple one. Unfortunately, Microsoft's made it such that these customers must do something. Anything they do incurs costs that are unplanned for, costs that most people will kind of see, spending money and not really getting anything new. So what we've tried to do is lessen that financial impact. And the way we've done that is with two incentives. The first incentive, since you're using the Microsoft forms still that you already own and we'll let you continue to use them, we should charge you less for unified messaging because we're not supplying all of it in this case. So the unified messaging user licenses will be no charge to the customers that are moving from Exchange Online to our system. And that'll be a nice amount of money and help a little bit. But more than that, we really need enough of incentive to make sure people come look at our solution. So what we're also going to do is reduce charges on the ports on our system. You buy so many ports depending on the size of your system. A good deal of the cost of our system is in the ports. So what we're going to do is reduce the cost on ports based on how many years of maintenance you buy in advance. So there'll be a charge if you buy 1-year maintenance that comes with the system, and that'll be normal. But if you buy a second year, then we'll reduce the charge for the ports by some percentage and more for a 3rd year, 4th year, etc. And it's a very significant discount. And we think that should be enough, hopefully, to get people to come talk to us about how this would work for them. And that takes us, if I'm still online, hopefully I am, to the question.
I can still hear you.
All right, I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. Yes, so we do have a couple of questions in the queue. If you have a question to submit and you haven't already typed it across to us, you can find the question area in the webinar panel. If it's minimized, use the orange arrow in your upper right corner, and then you should see questions as well as handouts toward the bottom. Okay, so Neil, first question. Is there any hardware required with the AVST solution?
Well, there's a server it runs on, but it can certainly be virtualized. So let's say you're a Hyper-V or a VMware shop and you have the hosts available, then no, our solution would be a software-only solution.
Okay, great. Next question. If you have on site but still use an SBC to connect the PBX, Microsoft says that is a supported configuration. It's a question or a statement, I'm not sure, so maybe you can clarify on that at the announcement.
I think we'll have to take that one offline because
okay.
If you have Exchange Online, then I'm not sure what you would be using the SBC for. In terms of messaging, you might be using it for Skype, for some other features. But if you have Exchange Online, for now at least, that remains a viable way to deploy Exchange. Now, keep in mind, they're really pushing for the cloud. So even if you feel, oh, I dodged a bullet because I only have Exchange Online, you might still want to do a little research and line up a strategy in case their next step is to do the same thing for Exchange on site.
Okay, so, and I may have misread the question. He says it's not Exchange Online, it's all on-premise, so maybe that's a separate scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, we will follow up with each of you that have submitted a question offline, as Neil mentioned, so want to make sure that we did answer those questions appropriately. Next question, does AVST integrate with Office 365 and Skype for Business in the cloud?
So today, in order to integrate with Skype for Business as the telephony system, it has to be a hybrid system. In other words, you have to have some components locally at the enterprise. The only way to not have Skype on site is to use the Cloud PBX. And if you're using the Cloud PBX, so everything's in the cloud, today we do not integrate with that. No one can. There's no real APIs for that yet. If you look back to when Skype was released, there was a lot of interest, but immediately people found there were things missing. There was no call center. There was no way to do call recording. There were quite a few shortcomings. And Microsoft released some very nice APIs, and an entire industry developed for third-party applications for Skype Enterprise, and filled in pretty much all those gaps. Unfortunately, as they went to the the Cloud PBX, they did the same thing. They released it with no APIs, and it didn't have any of those features. So it's difficult for people to use that. But if you're using Skype and you have a Skype component on site, then we can connect to that, and that can be your only phone system or another phone system as well as the legacy phone system.
Okay, thanks, Neil. All right, I'm just doing a quick scroll through, and it looks like we got to all the questions, unless someone is submitting another right now as we speak. Just want to clarify one more time for those of you who might have joined a couple of minutes late. We will make these slides available to you as well as the recording. And look for an email from us. It's the webinar follow-up email that will come out within an hour or two, and we'll include a link to both of those. And in addition, we actually have an Exchange Online option resource page on our website, and I will include a link to that as well. There's some documents and other things that clarify some of what, actually, it's not clarification of what Neil talked about, but it's more information. There's a white paper, for example. So if you want to check that out, if there's any additional information, we'll make that available to you. And as I mentioned as well, we will, for those of you who asked questions, we'll make sure we follow up with you offline as well, just to double check and make sure you got your answer. And then, of course, we want to thank you for taking the time to join us, and I'll let Neil give his wrap up as well.
Thank you, Ann, and thank all of you for coming. We certainly enjoy the chance to speak to you in this direction. It lets us obviously talk to a lot more people than we could by coming out to your business. Plus, you'll do this, whereas you probably wouldn't let us into your business. So hopefully you find these helpful, and if not, let us know. And if so, let us know. And also, if there's anything else you'd like to see us cover, you can get in touch with us. You can always get in touch with us at info@avst.com, and we will be very responsive because we like this interface with the customers. So thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.